One of the things I'm fascinated by the way, is why is it that even when we know we need to change, we still don't? Human beings are very interesting. I think we're very inefficient in a sense that we will know that there is a smarter, better alternative. But because we've got habits linked to the old way of doing things, we'll keep doing things the old way.
Yeah, and it's more than just habit. I think we attach so much value, and I think it's the value that keeps us stuck in the old. I mean, I still talk to people today, and I asked them, like during the lockdown, and I said, has anything in your life fundamentally shifted? Even if it's an idea or a view or a perspective of the world. And I asked about 50 people, and 5 of them said, no, nothing's changed. I'm just working from home. And yeah, when this is all over, I go back to work as usual. I said, no, you won't. No, you won't. You got to pray hard that whoever you report to for work still has a business, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people they don't yet appreciate what this is going to do to many businesses out there.
And how do we get them to appreciate? Because I think for a lot of people, it starts to sound very academic until it has actually happened to you. And I think it goes back to that human condition thing that we suffer from. But even the virus, COVID, to a lot of people, it's a thing that's happening somewhere out there until you hear somebody has it and has since perished, and then it becomes real.
Well, I think there are 2 things there. I think the speed at which Corona became a global topic is a part of why you're seeing this massive disconnect. For the average person, it all happened too quickly. For the average person, Corona didn't become a subject of conversation until mid-February, really. Unless you are the kind of person who was reading global media, then you would have known what was happening in the rest of the world. But if you're not, like if you're spending your time watching a soapy and amusing yourself with a local fixture of soccer, right?
Reading Mills and Boone.
Exactly, there you go. Then for you, it's not real, and it didn't become real or even a subject of conversation until mid-Feb.
Yeah.
Mid-February happens, this thing now becomes a part of conversation. And then you're told, you've got to take this thing seriously. You're going, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Like, my life was fine 2 weeks ago.
My life was perfect, yeah.
I was saying to someone yesterday, the problem with coronavirus is that right now we're going through that part of I Am Legend that the producers edited out, right? Because if you watch I Am Legend, you see the beginning where the world is going haywire, and he's taking his wife and son to the helicopter, and they're going to be and he says, "I'm going to stay. This is ground zero."
Completely oblivious.
Exactly. So you see the pandemonium. And then you get, thrown forward to this world where human beings are gone, and he's, running the streets with this dog. And you're going, what happened in the middle?
What happened? Yeah.
This is the middle. That's why people don't have a concept of it. This is the middle.
Right. And I suppose, Vusi, that's why I then created these big, small conversations, because globally, every type of expert is weighing in on the crisis, what it really means, and then they're also weighing in on post the crisis, what happens post the crisis. So this debate is happening globally, and yet as an individual, you're searching for meaning in all of this, right? And I think it's also important to have the small conversation about what is expected of the individual post the crisis is what I'm interested in. What is that? What is that conversation? What is that narrative? Because I think COVID is going to impact every aspect of our lives. You and I today may only talk on the aspect that impacts our ability to earn an income, right? Our small businesses, our big businesses, our careers. But really, there's the mental condition. I think when change happens so rapidly and so suddenly, I think we're going to have a new pandemic of mental wellness or lack thereof. And I think that's not spoken about enough, but not for today's conversation. So
tell me a bit about your idea in this mental wellness thing.
I just think that the collective psyche is going to be impacted by what is happening. So when we talk about people are going to lose their jobs. People are going to lose their income. People are going to sink into a deep depression because you don't know what to do next. What used to be reliable was, oh, well, I've got enough. I've got a degree. I've got this. I can just look for another job. But the reality is, of course, that job is not there because that business has had to shut down. So when nothing is predictable and uncertainty is the only certainty, and we are thrown into the sphere of the unknown, that's a very scary place for human beings to be. We go to schools, we have so many mechanisms that put us in a state of knowing, right? And that's what the previous era was all about. It was framed, it was neatly packaged in boxes, it was predictable, and that's why we could write good strategy for 10 or 20 years ahead of time, because we could see the cause and effect of any relationship. And now we can't. So how is that going to bode for the collective psyche of human beings when nobody knows? And that's the reality of post-COVID, is that nobody has a freaking clue.
I love that. I love that. That's a great thought.
Yeah.
I wish I'd come up with it. That's a really cool thought.
Oh, come on. But this is what conversationing does, right? We get to share thoughts and ideas. And the important thing is that in sharing those thoughts and ideas, we start getting a semblance of knowing. We start to put our fingers on what could be and what is possible. And that's what I'm excited about. I think there's enough talk about the doom and gloom that COVID brings, and we can see it, we can feel it, we can touch it during the crisis. What excites me is that if there's no playbook that exists post the crisis, that means we're free to rewrite a new playbook. And we don't have to labor ourselves with old thinking and old tools. We literally can create. And the creators could be you and me, regular everyday people. It does not have to be an institution of any sort.
I think the difficulty, you're right, but I think the difficulty many people have is people don't know freedom anymore. Freedom was regimented out of us. You and I haven't really been free since we were 3 years old, because post that there is the institutionalization of life. There's the regiment that takes place. There's the routine. There's the timetabling. Then that's what life becomes. You think about yourself from preschool days, the very first thing you're taught is time and the concept of time and the concept of activity-based time allocation. I've got an activity I've got to do, and I've got a certain amount of time that I've got to do it. And so this thing about freedom, I'll give you a very practical example. My body clock is shot right now.
Isn't it crazy?
I am like, I don't know what is. I finally understand why in World War II Germany, one of the techniques they used to torture people was they put you in a room with no windows and they left the lights on for months.
Isolation.
Because not only isolation, but your brain can't connect to the concept of time. The lights are on 24 hours a day, 4 months. How do you know when to sleep and when to wake up? When so your body goes into this frenzy of these moments feel like they're repeating themselves. Somebody sent me a meme the other day that says, my relationship with days today is today, this day, yesterday, that other day, right?
I saw that, yeah.
So there's like this, time is just like war. But you and I have been regimented into the system of using time as a framework.
In a linear format.
In a linear fashion, exactly. So as a framework of understanding productivity, as a framework of understanding contribution, as a framework of understanding worth. Right. You allocated self-worth based on how much time you gave people and how much time they gave you. Right. You allocated your productivity at work based on how much time you were putting in. This was all time-based and time and activity-based. And now all of a sudden, people are going, you're free. You're going, wait, free to do what?
Exactly. Where do I need, tell me where I need to be, what I need to be doing. And you're so right. And I think a lot of people will relate to the body clock. And the interesting thing is, what is productivity now? What does it mean when you don't have people sitting in front of you and you can monitor them between 8 and 5? How do you know they're being productive or not?
Yesterday, between you and I had a proper meltdown because I am type A personality to the T, right? So I understand structure, process, rigor, rigidity, command, and control. That's how my brain works.
I don't
and
know you. My mind
right?
works in the complete opposite.
And it's been beaten into me since. So I was thinking yesterday, I'm like, why is my brain melting like this? And then I realized it's been beaten into me since the first day I walked into the dojo when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
My life became command and control.
Right.
And a big part of the reason I've succeeded is because I'm good at command and control. I'm good at it.
Right.
Now all of a sudden I'm in a world where I can't see my people. I'm like, so are you working? What are you doing? You know? You've been quiet for 2 days. Yeah, where are you? Where are you?
Show
quiet for
me.
2 days. You're watching ETV scandal there. I don't think you're working. So it's a huge shift. I think that all of us are going to need to make.
So I'm your complete opposite. I mean, I grew up in the same system as you did, right? And yet I've always been in the search for freedom. I've always been frustrated by the allocation of time, the box, you know, because you study this then becomes your career for life. And I remember many years ago during a job hunt and a recruitment agent saying to me, but wait, you've spent 6 years in industry A. You can't switch now and go to another industry. I was like, why? What do you mean I can't do that? I want to do that, right? And I always attached value to the things I have learned and therefore are able to apply. And this is the beauty of the 21st century, that information and knowledge is not static. And unless you learn the ability to acquire new knowledge and new information that is credible, right? Because the internet has made information way too available. And now you don't.
I love that. Information that's credible. I like that.
Yeah, now that's a new skill, right? Now you got to learn, how do you make information credible? How do you know it is credible? Because previously, universities did that for us. They distilled it, they tested it, and they packaged it in a way that we believed. And now everybody is pouring ideas, thoughts, concepts onto the internet. And of course, this is the era of fake news. So a new critical skill is sifting through all of that and understanding what is usable and what is credible. But beyond that, you now have to apply it. And applying it, in my view, says, if I study and I scan the environment around me, what problem do I want to solve? Because therein lies the value that I bring. Right? And the value that I bring is in my ability to implement the solution that I come up with. And of course, we must understand that in a fast-paced world that we live in like today, today's solution is tomorrow's problem. The ability to keep doing that at a very fast pace is the next big skill. Too.
When did this happen to you? Who's this girl? What the hell? I'm out. What?
Vusi, 10 years is a long time.
I'd say.
But that's what happens when you're in the hunt for freedom, right? And it's a very painful process to go through. I'm bearing the scars of trying to create an alternative path for myself, where I feel I can bring value to the world. And for me, it was never going to be in the linear world of the previous era. And how exciting is that? We can now talk of pre-COVID as the previous era. Because as we said earlier, the future is here now.
Yeah. I was saying to somebody the other day, I called it life BC, life before coronavirus, right?
And boy, we're going to have some stories to tell to our kids, because right now, even education is changing, right?
Everything is changing. I mean, it's one of the things I think about what's happening at the moment for me that's interesting is, again, I keep asking myself the question, what is the tilt of change? So if you studied mankind and you studied civilizations and you wanted to understand how do you really transform the way people work, live, love, inspire, educate, etc., how do you transform the way human beings experience what it means to be a human being on this place called Earth? Because if you think about certainly for me, that's really been my job. I'm the guy people call in when they're trying to make people change, when they're trying to create a shift. So one of the things I realized early on in my career, I always thought if I gave them the information about the benefit and the potential upside, they'd change themselves. And, then I set off into this academic path. And after tens of thousands of hours of academia, several qualifications later, I realized that wasn't working. Then I went, but what is it? Because even when people, then I thought, well, if you resource it, they would definitely change, right? And so we kind of built, my old consulting firm, which I sold, was built on the idea of helping leaders resource change. So it was around, you're a leader, you want to make your people change, but are you resourcing it? And resourcing change is something as simple as shifting the work environment, shifting how they experience work. I will never forget, I had a business leader who was running something called PBB, which is Personal and Business Banking, one of the major 4 banks. And he and I were having this conversation. And I said to him, what is it with you and making people at head office rock up at work at 8 o'clock, right? And because that was one of the major concessions he had given at the beginning of the program. He was like, okay, we'll relook at this thing. And, it took very long. He made some of the concessions, et cetera, et cetera. One was in the world where I was like, this thing about changing, what drives it? Because it's clearly not information. It's clearly not resources. Then I thought, it must be technology. The technology was available. People would change. It wasn't that either. Because the technology was there. The marginal cost to access that technology was close on 0. The internet was proliferating, and you could access any platform, but people still were doing the old thing. I think what Corona has shown us, actually, is the answer to that question is a very simple one. Human beings change for 2 reasons, pain or pleasure. It's that basic, and it's that simple. We are stick and carrot creatures, right? So the reason we're all staying at home is because there's a stick. There's something's going to happen if something might happen if you get out of home and you get infected and you don't have the right cover and you're not protected by, there's a potential risk there. So there's a stick here. Let me be careful. And I think for me, that's been a big part of the unlock was going, hold on. So this whole time, all you needed to do was to create an incentive system and a punishment system to drive the right behavior. Now, the insight sounds simple. Its application is incredibly complex. So, could you imagine, for instance, you run an airline business after coronavirus? I'm not sure there'll be any left, but so let's imagine you run an airline business, right? After coronavirus. And you want to incentivize your customers to buy seats on your airline as early as possible so that you can pre-fill the airline, get the cash up front, and capitalize your business. In the olden day, the way you did it was you lowered the cost of the seat.
Right.
The presumption was that the price of the seat was what prohibited people buying it, right?
Right.
I'm not sure that that's the case anymore. I don't think it's the price of the seat. I think now it's about giving people a reason to travel.
Right.
You're an airline. How do you give people a reason to travel? That's not in your core competence.
And that's why we need multiple skilled people in the
100%.
new era, right?
100%.
I think musicians combined with dev people, combined with a poet and a scientist in a room will have that answer, because what is being decided by the very question that you asked is the future of humanity, right?
Yeah.
And it's not going to come from the engineer must give us the engineering answer, the scientist. It's going to come from the collective mindsets of human beings, and especially those that want to be ahead of the curve. But what's interesting is I saw the conversation you had with Mike Fannin recently, and I fully agree with him when he said the change has been a long time coming. COVID did not create the situation that we are in. It's been coming. But thankfully, or to be a little more sensitive, what COVID has done is made the change very apparent to a lot more people. And so now we've been accelerated into that future that is today. So I'm interested, the airline example is a very good one, and travel. What other new normals do you see? For your answer, I saw an advert for the Durban July. They're still doing it in 2020. They just moved the date from early July to the end of July. And I'm thinking,
No, they.
I don't know if people want to be in a place where there's more than 10,000 people gathered.
I think that one of the challenges for a country like South Africa is there is an inbuilt internal mental resilience and resistance that is necessary to survive, particularly as a poor Black person in South Africa. And for me, that's one of the things that policymakers have missed as an insight in this whole, why aren't people adhering to the rules of lockdown?
Yeah.
So just logically and empathize for a moment. If you grew up in a township and you've lived in a shack, you live with 9 other family members, you have no running water, no electricity, and the only source of income is the grandmother who earns an income grant. Your entire life, your ability to create sanity in what is clearly a space of insanity, your ability to dream, to laugh, to live, because what people forget about people, about human beings, even in the most desperate of circumstances, is we will find a reason to live, right? If they took, and that's why there was a beautiful poem by Maya Angelou. She was talking about how Black people survived slavery. And she said, we survived slavery by having the audacity to live. I was like, wow, that's so powerful. Yeah. The idea that once somebody has robbed you of your desire to live, that's it. It's over. It's gone. It's finished. So for people in those most desperate of circumstances, every day they wake up, they need to have a sense of hope about the world. And so internally, they build in this resistance and resilience to negativity around the world. So they get told you live in the most unequal country in the world, and they go, well, I still live here, so I might as well make the best. They understand the racial demographics of South Africa and how wealth has a very clear racial skew, and they go, well, I still live here, so I'm going to make the best of it. They understand that if you go to a government-run township school in a rural area, you're not going to get the best quality of education, but they go, well, I'm going to have children anyway because I still think that there's going to be a better home. Does that make sense? So when that person has an inbuilt internal resistance and resilience to the world telling them something is dangerous. Right. Now you're going to them and going, there's a virus they can't see from a place they've never been. And this virus could kill them. Do you really think they're going to go, yeah, I'm going to stay in my Mkuku with 9 family members? Of course not. Like, it's not part of their wiring. So, I add this to the comment about the Durban July because I think it's folly for them to think they can do the July. But I also think that they have a point because actually you might find people who've got this internal inbuilt resistance and resilience going, dude, I'm going to the July because I was locked in. I need to let go. And you know what? If Corona's going to take me, let Corona take me.
You know, Vusi, when you speak about what some may call the bottom of the pyramid, I think that is a largely untapped gold mine for the reason that you have just explained. I mean, for commercial reasons, we know a lot of businesses and industries that have found fortunes at the bottom of the pyramid, but I think the unexplored fortune is that ability to be so deeply connected to the human story. And
I love the way you phrase things, by the way, the unexplored fortune. I love that.
Well, thank you. But it is the unexplored fortune, right? At the bottom of the pyramid that may give us a glimpse into what it means to be a human in the 21st century. And it's things like resilience, agility, the inventiveness that comes from having nothing. And I think this is South Africa's big opportunity, is that we are one of the most complex societies for both our historical reasons and just how our economy is structured. I think in that complexity and the fact that we are known as underdeveloped is the opportunity to be inventive. And I wish that post-COVID, we would structure the businesses that remain anyway in a way that allows us to tap into who people are, because in who they are lies the value that they can bring as we reshape business and society. Just knowing that it is possible. Then we can start exploring other things and seeing what can we bring out of our people that can help us rethink business models, right?
Yeah.
Creating
Yeah.
employment. What does that mean? How do we
Yeah.
measure productivity? How do we measure value that comes from people?
Sorry, if I may, I think one of the things that for me, anyway, I've been screaming to my clients about has been the decentralized model of work. Now, many of our work environments are very centralized. That's how the system of, modern economics is built.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is efficiencies. So there is argument about this, but my theory is that the first thing mankind ever had to manage, which was a complex mechanism for him to manage, a complex organism rather, for him to manage, was war. It was the first time mankind had to organize for the purpose of a defined goal. We were going to war.
Right.
And so if you think about the theory of management, I know. Think about the theory of management, it's based on this idea around the constructs and constraints that human beings have, right? So all of a sudden, we've got a world of work that's defined by the very same constructs and constraints. How do we define a marketplace? It's a place of war. How do we know if we're winning? We calculate market share. How do we know if we have the best brand? We look at margin earned as a function of the cost to produce, marginal revenue or premium, right? How do we gain so our entire framework is based on this idea of winning in the battlefield. And then we work backwards and go, so if I'm going to win in the battlefield, that means I need to centralize the way I'm organized, because that's how we organized for war. Yeah. The general gave the instructions, the colonels supervised them, the lieutenants carried them out, and the soldiers went to the battlefield and executed. That's how it went. And all of a sudden, you're in this place of work where people are going, how about we dial in once a week, check how I'm at, check how I'm doing, and leave me alone? How does that sound? And how do you recruit? I was having this conversation with a friend of mine 2 days ago. I'm like, I think one of the major industries that's going to be shifted is recruitment.
Right.
Because I'm not sure there's any MD who's going to be worried about somebody's, how well your CV is written anymore. I think people are going to start looking for different set of skills and a different set of things.
Yes. And it's so unfair, because when did people have time to reframe and repackage that?
100%. It's coming. It's definitely coming. So the question you asked earlier was which industries? I think airlines are definitely airlines already as it is globally their balance sheets are shot, right? So they're having to recapitalize. I mean, I saw the other day, was it yesterday, the day before, that even Richard Branson has gone to the UK government to ask for a bailout for Virgin Atlantic. So even the most profitable airlines are going to battle through this period of coronavirus, right? United Airlines in the US did well last year. They've already gone to the US government to say, we're going to need some money to see us through. You've seen what's happening with SAA locally.
It's taxpayers who are ultimately going to bail out big business.
Let me tell you what I think. I think for governments that have competing interests, you're going to see more. I think people underestimate the Treasury of South Africa saying to SAA, we're not giving you more money. Mm. It's almost like, oh, Treasury said no. No, do you realize what just happened? Treasury just said no to one of the key state enterprises that they have defended since the dawn of our democracy. Right. It predates our democracy, founded, I think, in 1960s or 1940s, I think it is. And not only that, government had issued guarantees on debt for SAA. And all of a sudden, they've said no. So what's happening is government is going, I either am going to feed people, I'm going to keep them healthy during this coronavirus crisis. And I've promised these people called small businesses that I'm going to help them rebuild their businesses. I've promised Mr. and Mrs. Average, Joe Public, that I'm going to give them an economy that's growing with jobs. SAA, I don't have money for you to fly. Like, I just don't have it.
And that's a major shift. And I think we should be lucky in the South African context at this stage.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. So I think in the rest of the world, you're going to see more of that. You're going to see more governments and more institutional funders looking at airlines and going, do you really need a fleet this size?
Yeah.
Like, do you really need a fleet this size? Do you need to fly these routes? And I think there's going to be a whole new reframing of that industry. I don't think it'll die. It definitely won't die. But I think it'll look very different. So that, and then I think human settlements. I think housing for people is going to be very different after this. I'm fascinated at this, by the way. I wrote an article on it. So the government of Gauteng, for the longest time, wasn't able to quantify the number of homeless people in South Africa, particularly in Gauteng. They didn't have the actual number. They estimated. And of course, when you do statistics, you do statistical inferences. So you go, this is accurate to the nth whatever, right? But they estimate, they didn't have the actual number. Coronavirus hits, and all of a sudden, not having the actual number of homeless people is a problem, because you need to know where they are. You need to know if they're fed. You need to know if they're healthy. You need to know if they're carrying the disease, because it's not as if between 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening, they live in a parallel universe. They occupy the same physical spaces as your people who are tax-paying citizens.
Yeah.
So what do? They create these shelters. I saw the statement by Nyaza, who's taken over social something for the Gauteng. He was saying they thought 15,000 people would apply for these homeless shelters. In the first 24 hours, they had 54,000.
Wow.
Right? Exactly. That's, what is that, 4 or 5 fold, right? So immediately your brain has to start jumping to, so one, we didn't know the size of the problem. But two, we've proven that even if we don't know the size of the problem, we can fix it. So you know what's going to happen after this? People are not going to accept not receiving houses from the government for 10 years anymore. They're going to go, what are you talking about? You gave us makeshift shelters when a virus was killing us in 2 weeks. I've been waiting for my RTP house since 1994. Sorry, you're going to have to make a plan. So I think even how we're commissioning housing, how we're building homes for people, that's going to fundamentally shift. These people who do container-based homes, prefabs, a lot of those, I think, are going to see a boom in their businesses. Exactly. Because the brick structure anymore just takes too long. And I think governments are going to start rethinking.
Wow. So VT, I have to wrap up. I have to run. But give me your final thought in terms of post the crisis, the things that you should be excited about. Who do you think are going to be the winners post the crisis?
I think the first winner actually post the crisis is going to be the average citizen.
Yes.
And that's I think that's it's a big bold statement. But I think the average citizen is going to win on many fronts. One, I think a lot of industries that have been protected, that were provisioning goods that were inefficient, that were expensive and overpriced, are going to be forced to rethink their business models.
Yes.
I think the inefficient will die, the best will survive.
Yes.
And that'll create natural efficiencies in the system, and the average citizen will benefit off the back of that. I also think that the way governments do governance will change. Because there's going to be increased scrutiny, there's going to be increased monitoring, and the world I think is consolidating towards the singularity of protecting the human race.
Right.
And that's going to mean all of a sudden, the decisions countries are making about the provisioning of health and healthcare become global agendas.
Right.
And the average citizen is going to benefit there again. And then I think the third reason I think the average citizen is going to benefit is because Harvard Business School can make 64 courses available for free during lockdown. I've now seen my alumni, my business school has done that now. They've made 14 courses available for free during the period of lockdown.
Right.
And I think you're increasingly going to see educational institutions rethinking, because this is, I can't tell you how many times I've opened presentations with this statement. Human beings need schooling. They don't need schools. Right. Human beings need education. They don't need buildings.
Right.
And you can now imagine the Minister of Higher Education who said, we need to build universities for kids to go to school before we make the universities free. And all of a sudden, you've got people who are being educated and nobody built a new school.
Right.
These young people that are supposed to go to these higher education institutions are going to go, what do you mean you need to build a university? Why can't you just take the content and make it available online and give me my degree when I finish after 3 years?
And now
so I think the average citizen is going to be the biggest beneficiary. Yes. And now we know it's possible. You did it, so keep doing it.
Thank you. And from my perspective, if you ask me who I think are going to be the greatest winners, I think it's the group that we label millennials and centennials, because they do not have the burden of having to unlearn the mindsets and the paradigms and the conditioning of the previous era. They were kind of born into this kind of world that is a constantly shifting tectonic plate. So I can't wait to hear from them. And as you know, well, I'll tell you if you didn't know, I'm rethinking university level education for that group. in a completely alternative way. So yeah, but thanks for the chat. That was awesome.
Oh, good, man. This was good. It was good to connect after all these years.
It was indeed, and we'll chat soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zuki.
Mwah.